All right, time for some sass, some negative, unpopular opinions time. So, caveat if that's not what you want. I have plenty of positive content on the channel, but today I wanted to do the Unpopular Opinions 2.0 tag, created by Elliot Brooks, inspired by the original Unpopular Opinions tag, which I have done. So I'll have her original for this, I'll have my Unpopular Opinions tag, and I'll have the prompts for this one in the description. Consider yourself tagged. It's fun, especially these questions. I think Elliot did a great job putting together questions that I think are really, interesting takes on these, and I think more updatable for me than the original tag, just because I tend to vibe with the popular opinion a lot. I don't really have updates. My unpopular opinions from 2 years ago are still my unpopular opinions. I don't have a lot of new ones. So yeah, we're gonna get into it though, starting with the first prompt, which is a genre great, you don't get the hype. And so this was tricky because sometimes I can understand the hype even if I'm not part of that. Sometimes it's but I get it. Do I love Lord of the Rings as much as everyone else? No, but I get the hype. I totally get it, especially, for what it did for the genre. It's usually a lot of people's first time in high epic fantasy. I get that. So I went through Reddit's top 100, and I was just looking, being okay, this is how I'm going to measure hype, because this is, a population aggregate, what makes it in the top 10, and I just, looked through the top until I was what are the things that I just, I don't get it? And I have two. My first one is the First Law world. I think it's very good art. I understand when people like it. I don't understand how it is so liked, because it's fairly, there's just no plot for the first three. And I've only read the first three. So I say this only having read the first three, but I've read the first three twice. And I've tried to read Best Served Cold multiple times, and maybe one day I'll get there. And eventually I'm just going to jump into Little Hatred, and if I really love that trilogy as much as a bunch of my friends do, then I'll go back and read the standalones, and no one come for me, because if this is the only way I read First Law, it's the only way I read it. But I joined BookTube, and everyone was talking about First Law, which I had read before I was on BookTube. I'd read the first three books, and I'm I remember those being fine. Just fine. I read them with a bunch of my friends. They liked them a little bit more than me, but none of us were this is our new, favorite series of all time. We just read it because I was this looks like a fun, derivative on Dungeons and Dragons, and it was, it kind of, pushed against a lot of the norms that we see in fantasy, and that's, fun to see. It's good art. But, the love it gets, I'm just I thought I read it wrong. That's a classic thing you get in the comment section. You didn't read it right. And I'm just okay, I'll read it again. And so I did. I even did the audiobooks with the narrator that everyone loves. And I'm just this is fine. It's really fine. But I don't get it. I'm not connecting with it the way other people are. Not on a writing style level, not on a character level. I think the most I connect with it is that I appreciate its project. I think it has a really cool project. But I don't think that's enough for me to understand why it's so popular. My other one is Wheel of Time. I've read all the books. I have a should you read for it. It's fairly tempered. I might be sassy right now, but that video I think is actually one of my best review videos in terms of who this should work for, etc. But I don't get it. The magic is not as cool as I was led to believe. The world building is not as vast as I was led to believe, and I don't care about any of the characters. Everything people talk about with Wheel of Time, I'm oh, that sounds so cool. And when I pick it up, I get none of that. And so I just I don't get it. I just don't. It doesn't deliver, I think, on any of the promises people in the fandom. I feel I'm reading a different book every time. And I don't know. And then some of the things that people are oh, and it all ties into the beginning. I'm this is just bad plotting. This is not how you pace plot. Especially not with this many pages. And somehow it is both too big and not long enough for all the things that are in it. I don't know. It's a thing I've done. And now I have opinions about it. And they are a little unpopular. I don't know if they're vastly unpopular, but it is a genre great. It's pretty much our entryway into modern fantasy as we know it. So here we are. I think both of these are big stepping stones for their subgenres of fantasy. Number 2 is an adaptation you wish was never made. And I have 3. My first instinct was Aragon. God, I hate Aragon. I actually didn't mind the first 3 books. I liked the first 2 the most. Aragon and Eldest are good books. Brazinger was too much, and then by the time the 4th book came out, I was in college and I wasn't reading, and I've never gone back. I've never felt the urge. But I did watch Aragon on my birthday with a bunch of my friends. It was bad. It was really, really, really bad. Like, no redeeming qualities. And then same time period, I think within a year of this film, was the original, like, Golden Compass movie remake with, like, Nicole Kidman. That's trash. Like, there's some things of it that are okay. Like, it's not, like, the worst, but then they changed the ending. Like, no. Like, His Dark Materials, it has stakes. That's, like, the whole point. And there's something that happens at the end of the book that is consequences for actions that the movie's like, nah, no, we're not gonna do that. And then never got a sequel, so I guess for the sake of a complete story within a movie, sure, but no one likes it. No one rewatches it. So I don't like either of those. I'm glad we finally do have a better His Dark Materials adaptation, like, truly. And then my other one is, in general, the Divergent trilogy. Like, the first two movies are okay. Like, they're fine. But Allegiant, which is, like, the equivalent of straight to DVD, it was bad. So, like, I don't know. I don't love how it turned out. I guess I don't hate that it exists. I had a lot of fun, like, not hate watching, but making fun of it with one of my friends who we read the books together, and, like, we finally one day were like, oh, yeah, there's Allegiant. It's in theory part 1. They never made the part 2, to my knowledge, so... So again, Allegiant Part 1 does not end like Allegiant, which I hate the ending of Allegiant, so maybe that's a positive, but it makes Spy Kids, like, 3D look good, I think, in its special effects. And if you've seen Spy Kids 3D, you know, that's pretty bad. But those are my answers for number 2. I just think those are all just, like, poorly done. Like, they're just not good. Number 3 is I have to fight my inner snob, because people just don't get it. And for the most part, most of my favorites that get low ratings, I'm just like, I kind of get it. And, you know, it's like they're weird, like Nine Fox Gambit. It's an odd book, like, you know. Sometimes I'm just like, yeah. Like, but there's one where I'm just like, I think sometimes it has a low rating because, I don't know, I really do have to fight it. And it's Goliath by Tochi Onyebuchi. I think this is really impactful, interesting, pushing boundaries art. And I don't think a lot of people wanted that when they read it, or, I just don't think they got it. Because I think that if you get it, or you're reading it with friends and you dissect it, like, even if you don't love the reading experience, even if it's not, like, escapism, which it's not, I think it's fantastic art. And so I'm always just like, this book deserves more attention and time if you pick it up. Otherwise, yeah, I guess it's not just, like, a fun dystopian sci-fi time. It's not a page turner. It's thoughtful, it's methodical, it's meandering, it's non-linear, it's doing all of these things. And sure, you can argue whether those things are done super well or not, but it's ambition. I don't know, I think it deserves more credit than it gets for all the things it's doing in such a dense, small package. And, like, I do think some critiques are valid. Like, it's not like I think everyone needs to give this 5 stars or anything like that, but it has a very low rating on Goodreads, and I don't think that's deserved, so... And I do think this is where it's like, it's my inner snob of someone who reads both literary fiction and science fiction, and this is the marriage of the two, pretty much 50-50. Like, this is a science fiction novel, but it also has a lot of what you would expect in a literary fiction, where it is just like, we're just playing with words, and we have references and allusions, and sometimes, you know, the path is not straight. So, yeah, sometimes I just feel like the care and attention that this novel requires to be appreciated is not given. But that is me being a snob, so I try to hold that in. Number 4, a book you were tired of people for hating. And I'm making this a category, because, I mean, I could have just said a couple things, but I think that when people pick up campy, melodramatic books and are mad at them for being campy, melodramatic books, I'm just done with it. I'm so annoyed with that. I'm like, that's what it's meant to be. Like, stop being mad at a drama for being dramatic. Like, I'm sorry, like, I don't know, and this happens all the time with books with, like, love triangles and things. It's like, it's supposed to have that. Like, that's the genre. Like, yes, it's in fantasy or sci-fi or whatever, but, like, it's storytelling media is meant to be a campy, melodramatic good time. And why don't you just let it be that? And stop trying to make it a novel it's not, because I guarantee you that novel does exist that you want, but it's not this one. And that's just how I feel a lot of time. And I think I feel this more aggressively with, like, visual media, because there's a lot of visual media I like that people are like, oh, I'm so done with it. And I'm like, it's fun. Let it be fun. I don't understand. So it's just not a blanket statement, but, you know, I get tired of it. I don't think it's useful. And I also do think that when people are saying things read young or too young adult, a lot of the times they don't like the angsty drama that comes with that genre, but they aren't like labeling it that way. So it's really hard for me to parse what people are and aren't vibing with when it comes to a young adult book to figure out if it's my thing or not, because personally, I do like melodramatic, angsty young adult books. I don't know, it harkens back to my angstier youth. I don't mind it when I'm in the mood. I obviously don't read it all the time, but like, I don't think that's a negative, and I think when things get hate on for that, I get annoyed. I truly get annoyed. All right, number 5. Powerful books that just didn't connect with you. That's a very brief paraphrase that I wrote down. I'm sure there's something better written for number 5 down below. And I wrote a few things. I think my most controversial is probably Wayfarers by Becky Chambers. People cry reading these books. People love these characters. They have such emotional responses to the Wayfarer series by Becky Chambers. And I've read 2 of them. I've read the first and the last. Oddly enough, I mean, they're all companion novels. You can read them in any order. And they're really just okay for me. Like, I think I liked the most recent one because it was told in the type of story that I love for, like, an Alfred Hitchcock movie. Like, everyone's suddenly in a location and they can't escape, so they have to get to know each other. Like, I like that kind of plot device. But in terms of, like, emotion, no, I feel nothing from a Becky Chambers book. And I've even read the novellas. I think the closest I ever felt something was To Be Taught If Fortunate, but even then I was like, meh. So I don't feel anything, and people, like, always are like, oh, warm hug, crying, I don't know, you name it. People have said it. I'm just like, this was an okay time. Maybe a little long. That's usually my thing. Like, I think the first Wayfarers books is a lot long. Like, a lot. Especially for, like, how little plot there is. Like, I can handle little plot. You just have to be, like, a 350-page book, not a 450-page book, you know? Like, get to the point. Or have a point. It does have a point, but it's a little long. It's a little long. And my other one is A Man Called Ove, which, like, people cry for all the time. They love this book. And I think it's fine. It's easy to read, and I get why it resonates with so many people. But at the same time, I do not like that our character has these suicide ideations that he is attempting to act on, and it's basically played off, I don't want to say for laughs, but I don't think it's used with care. Let's just put it that way. That's a big part of this book, and it rubs me the wrong way. I don't know. I think all the emotional impact later on is tainted by how I don't really love how the beginning played out with the character. And I'm not saying, it's bad or anything like that, but I did try to do research to figure out if this author, did any research into mental health or people with suicide ideation. Because, like, I don't know, if you had people in your life who've struggled with this, it's not flippant. I don't know. I didn't like how that was done. And so I think that's part of it. But I'm also, it's like, if it was a movie, which I haven't seen the Tom Hanks movie, I might have been more emotional because there would have been that sweeping score in the background or something. But reading it with just my eyeballs, I was like, I see why it's a popular book, but it was not powerful for me specifically. All right. Number 6, a character you don't get the hype for. So I wrote down some that I don't think would give me that much hate, but the one that I think is my most unpopular opinion is Fitz Chivalry. Which, like, it's not that I don't like Fitz. I just, like, he's such an interesting character to be loved in such a strong way, if that makes sense. Like, I think he's a very well-realized character, and that is part of the draw of him to people, is his flaws, his issues. Like, a lot of them are really grounded in experiences that a lot of people deal with now. So, like, it's not that I don't get it per se, but for me, like, Fitz is someone I put a lot of my emotional baggage on from other people in my life who I wish would just get it. So he's not fun for me to be around. It wasn't till, like, the end of Fool's Errand where I was finally like, okay, all right, you're being more of a character that I can, like, handle being in your head. So for me, I just don't love him as much as everyone else. Some of my less, I think, contentious takes is I don't get Jude and Cardan in the Prince of, or is it, I don't know what it's called, the Cruel Prince series. I don't get it. They're so boring to me. Like I say earlier in this tech, I love melodrama. I love the angst. I was expecting to have a great time with this series, and I was so bored because of these characters. I was just like, I don't care. You're so boring. Oh. And people are like, ride or die for this couple. And I'm just like, where is the tension? Where is the chemistry? I see none of it. So that's that one. And then my other one, which maybe will change once I have the audiobook, is Gideon from Gideon the Ninth. But people love the characters from Gideon the Ninth, and I'm just like, to the point where I read Gideon the Ninth with my eyeballs, and I read it, and I was like, that was fine. I don't quite get it. It had pacing issues for me, writing style issues, too many names. And then I'm watching reviews, and people are like, it's so funny. Gideon's so funny. And I was like, what? Humor? There is humor in this book? I missed that. So obviously I didn't interpret some witty scenes as witty, so maybe with the audiobook, those lines will land better in my brain than what my internal audio narrator did, So yeah, I don't know. These feel like characters that I see so much fandom love, and I'm just like, what? All right, number 7. Everyone wants an adaptation of this but me. This is probably my hottest take. Probably. With the exception of if it would be animated, which it won't be. And whenever people talk about this, they want a TV show live action. But I will say I could come around on anything if it's animated, especially if it's like 25 to 30 minute episodes and we get like 500 episodes. Like, I could be turned around on anything if that's the scenario. That's not how capitalism works right now. So I'm assuming 8 to 12 episodes a season. Maybe they're an hour long. Maybe we get 5 to 8 seasons. Okay? And I don't want that for the Stormlight Archives. I don't. I don't know why. I think it's like a series where I love the story told in books. I don't know what live action gives me specifically. Like, I'm not going to be mad if it happens. I'll watch it. But it also will take time away from Sanderson working on the rest of the Cosmere. Which, like, I would rather read the books. Like, I don't know. Like I said, if it was animated, maybe I'd come around, but there's so much that I'm like, how do you even live action it? And people are going to be so like, oh, the CGI is bad. Like, I don't want the conversations about the costumes and the settings and the CGI and how it doesn't look realistic enough when it's frickin' Roshar. Like, I don't want the conversations around the adaptation. And I just feel like an adaptation, like, the Stormlight's huge. That's its whole point. And we already just saw with Wheel of Time, another huge epic fantasy, that it's like, condensing it down is just really hard. I do think Stormlight will be better than Wheel of Time because whatever they're doing with Wheel of Time is just really weird, even from just like a source material adapting to a visual media perspective. But I don't know. I just don't want it. Mistborn I can come around with, but Stormlight Archive specifically, I'm just like, it's too big. It's too big, and I don't think I'll get to keep what I love while it's getting translated to a different media. That's because, like, the whole point is it's indulgence, I think, for me. Like, I love how much time I get to spend. And it's a little bit more about money and efficiency once we are translating that to a visual media. So that's probably one of my hotter takes. Number 8 is about how people have a bias that makes them love or hate a book more than they actually do. And I think we can all sort of relate to this, the idea that a book is so hyped, so maybe you're going to hate it less, or maybe you want to be on that hype train. It can go either way. And so the one I'm going to pick, and this is a good book. It is very popular. It is very well loved. I'm not hating on this book. I have a whole review on this book if you want to know my in-depth thoughts. But Babel by Harv Kwong, it was so hyped. I think it's hard to believe that people's opinions weren't swayed one way or the other based on that hype. Truly, especially because when I watched a bunch of those reviews for my recent release roundup videos, there were a lot of caveats. And, like, obviously people tend to, put caveats on books a lot of the times in their review styles, but there were significantly more. Like, a lot of times when people review a book, they'd be like, I like it because this, I don't like it because of that. They talk about it. It's rarer when people are like, oh, I really love this book, but it won't be for everyone because, like, that doesn't happen as often, and it doesn't happen as often for as many different types of reviewers as it did for Babel. It felt like people were, like, trying to be, like, convincing themselves why they love it as much as they do, even though it maybe wasn't their standard thing, if that makes sense. Which is fine. Like, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's real or fake. Like, if you loved a book, you loved a book. It's great. But I'd be hard-pressed, because it's like, it really wasn't, like, the most amazing thing I'd ever read, and I read a lot of fantasy and science fiction. I've read a lot of stuff that covers these themes. So, as I kind of say in that video, it's like, I kind of don't get the hype. But I do think the hype affected some people's reviews one way or the other. But it was hard for me to think of a book that people just, like, hate more than they think they do. I mean, I would say that maybe sometimes, some of the more popular fantasy romances or romances, I think people put more hate on than they do. Because I actually You know, I think it can sometimes just be exhausting to be recommended the same things over and over again, especially if you're well read in those genres and stuff like that. It's just like, but read all of these other things. They're better than this thing that is so popular. Like, I mean, something that comes to mind is like, you know, A Court of Mist and Fury. I'm sure there are a whole bunch of people who are like, oh my goodness, if one more person recommends this book, like that book is so bad. Whereas if they never were near the hype, they would probably be like, this is fine. I like other things more, but like, whatever. It's not a bad, because I don't think A Court of Mist and Fury is actually a bad form of what it is. Like, I don't think it's maybe the best thing of all time. I mean, for me, it's definitely comfort food, but like, I recognize that it's comfort food. But that's like probably the closest. It's just like, that is so mega popular, that author in general. It's just like, you know, I think it can be exhausting to be inundated with that hype. And then if it doesn't land for you, that's like even worse. So these are fun questions. Obviously, caveat, if I didn't say at the beginning, that like, I don't want to take away your love for things. Keep loving them. I like when my opinions ally with the popular opinion. That's like my favorite place to be. I don't like being contrarian. It doesn't happen that often. I tend to keep it to myself. But this seemed like a fun thing to do, and it's been a while, so. Let me know any of your answers to these questions. If you're not going to do this video, if you're going to do this video, let me know so I can keep my eye out for it. If you just want to leave an emoji to let me know you're here. Ooh, I don't know. There were some adaptation questions, so maybe like a movie symbol, like, you know, a movie camera, or like if they have the like, you know, camera action, like, I don't know what it's called, the thing that like opens and closes. If you understand what I'm talking about, that emoji. And otherwise, like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.